I want you to imagine two candidates. Same role, same company, same interview process, both equally qualified, both genuinely excited about the opportunity. The first candidate is sitting in the third round interview. Things have gone well. The hiring manager leans forward and asks, almost casually, "So what are your salary expectations?" And the candidate who prepared for behavioral questions and technical questions and culture fit questions freezes for just a moment. Then they do what most people do. They think about what feels reasonable. They think about not seeming greedy. They round down slightly to seem flexible, and they give a number, a specific single number. The hiring manager writes it down, nods, and says, "Great, that's helpful." The candidate feels relieved. They handled it. They get the offer. It's exactly the number they said. The second candidate is in the same room, the same conversation, the same question. But they've understood something the first candidate hasn't. They smile, they pause for just a second, and they say, "Before I answer that, I'd love to understand the full scope of the role. Could you share the budgeted range for this position?" The hiring manager, mildly surprised, gives a range. It's $18,000 higher than what the first candidate just locked themselves into. The second candidate says, "That works well for me," and moves forward. Same company, same role, same interview day. One of them left $18,000 on the table permanently, not just for this year, but for every raise, every bonus, every percentage-based increase for as long as they stay at that company. This is not a story about negotiation tactics. It's a story about a single question that most people have completely misunderstood, a question that is specifically designed to cost you money and that you've probably been answering wrong every time it's come up. My name is Roger, and I spent 14 years as a hiring manager at 2 Fortune 500 companies, which means I sat in on hundreds of conversations where this exact question came up. I watched it work exactly as it was designed to work, and I watched candidates hand over leverage they didn't even know they had. And honestly, it started to bother me because the game is rigged in a very specific, very quiet way, and almost nobody talks about it plainly. What I want to do today is walk you through everything that's actually happening when that question gets asked, the psychology behind it, the strategy behind it, the money behind it, and give you a framework for handling it that doesn't just feel good in theory, but actually works in practice. Because the answer to what are your salary expectations is not about money. It's about understanding the architecture of a trap and knowing exactly how to walk around it. Let's start at the beginning. The question is not what it appears to be. Here's the thing that nobody tells you before your first job interview. What are your salary expectations? Is not an information gathering question. It's not the company trying to understand your needs so they can accommodate them. It's a screening filter, a mechanism specifically designed to eliminate candidates who price themselves too high and, more insidiously, to save the company money from candidates who price themselves too low. A Glassdoor study from 2023 found that 59% of candidates who named a number first received offers below what the employer had already budgeted. Let that sit for a second. More than half the people who answer this question directly are walking away with less than the company was already prepared to pay. The question isn't trying to find out what's fair. It's trying to find out how cheaply they can hire you. This reframe is the most important thing I can give you. Because once you understand what the question is actually doing, your entire relationship to it changes. You stop trying to answer it correctly and you start trying to navigate it strategically. Those are very different things. The budget already exists. Your job is to make them reveal it first. Every posted role has an approved salary band. It was determined weeks, sometimes months before the job listing went live. HR knows the number. The hiring manager knows the number. The entire structure of the interview process is in a quiet and systematic way designed to hire you for as close to the bottom of that band as possible. You are not negotiating in the dark. You are negotiating with someone who is holding a card they're hoping you won't ask to see. The move, and this is backed up by real data, is to reverse the question. When asked about your salary expectations, the strategically correct response is to say something like, "I'd love to understand the full scope of the role first. Could you share the budgeted range for this position?" LinkedIn's 2022 workplace report found that candidates who reversed the question this way received offers averaging $8,000 higher than candidates who answered directly, $8,000. Not because they were more qualified, not because they negotiated harder afterward, simply because they asked to see the card first. And here's something I watched play out in real hiring conversations more times than I can count. When a candidate reverses the question calmly and professionally, it doesn't read as evasive. It reads as strategic, it reads as someone who understands the process and isn't going to be walked through it blindly. That quality, that quiet, grounded confidence is actually attractive to hiring managers. Because the way you handle yourself in a salary conversation tells us something about how you'll handle yourself in a vendor negotiation, a client pushback, a budget meeting. People who fold on their own compensation tend to fold everywhere else too. Naming a number too early permanently caps your ceiling. Harvard Business School negotiation research has confirmed something that experienced negotiators have known for decades. The first number stated in any negotiation becomes a psychological anchor. It's not a starting point that gets adjusted. It's a gravitational center that everything else orbits around. When you name a number early in the interview process, before you have full context, before you know the band, before you have any leverage, you have not made an opening offer. You have set a ceiling. And a ceiling that you set yourself is one the employer will work very hard to keep you under. Candidates who named a number in the first interview and later tried to negotiate received counteroffers averaging only 8-12% above their stated number, according to Salary.com's 2023 compensation report. Candidates who delayed the salary conversation until after receiving an offer negotiated increases averaging 14-20%. The difference isn't the candidate, it's the timing. Every week you hold off the salary conversation is a week in which your leverage grows because the company has invested more time, more people, more rounds of interviews in you as the chosen candidate. The cost of losing you increases. Your ability to negotiate increases with it. Naming a number early doesn't just give away leverage. It gives away leverage you didn't even know you had yet. Research is the only thing that makes you untouchable in this conversation. Here's the version of this conversation that ends well for you. The interviewer asks about salary expectations. You've done your homework, specifically from Glassdoor, from Levels, FYI, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from LinkedIn Salary Insights, what this role pays in this market at this level. And when the moment comes to discuss numbers, you don't guess. You cite, based on market data for this role in this market, the range I'm seeing is X to Y. Given my experience with Z, I'm targeting the upper portion of that range. Candidates who cited specific market data sources when presenting a range were offered above their stated minimum in 76% of cases, according to a 2023 Robert Half compensation study. Because the moment you demonstrate that your number is anchored in research rather than hope or guesswork, the employer realizes immediately that lowballing you will be awkward, not easy. You've made uninformed lowballing embarrassing for them. That's a very powerful place to be standing. Walking into a salary conversation without market data is like walking into a negotiation blindfolded. You might get lucky, you probably won't, and you'll never know what you left on the table. Never give a single number. The word range is your best friend. This is one of the most practical and most commonly violated rules of salary conversation. A single number has no flexibility. It signals a ceiling. It tells the employer exactly where the floor is and gives them no reason to go higher. A range, by contrast, signals research, signals professionalism, and creates room for dialogue without surrendering your position. But here's the piece most people miss about ranges. Where you set the floor matters enormously. Employers instinctively gravitate toward the lower end of any stated range. It's not malicious, it's just how anchoring works in practice. Which means if your actual minimum, the lowest number you genuinely accept is $85,000, your range should not start at $85,000. It should start at $90,000, maybe $92,000. Because when they land at the bottom of your stated range, they'll land above your actual minimum, and you'll have room to feel good about the outcome rather than quietly resentful. Set your floor above your true floor. Let them feel like they found the bottom when they haven't quite reached it. That single adjustment has real dollar value. Base salary is only part of the story. Most people never negotiate the rest. This one genuinely bothered me as a hiring manager because I watched it happen constantly. Candidate and company go back and forth on base salary for a week, finally land on a number that feels like a compromise, and both sides feel like the negotiation is done. And in that process, neither side ever discussed the bonus structure or the equity or the 401k matching or the remote flexibility or the professional development budget or the PTO policy. Base salary is frequently 30 to 40% of your actual total compensation. When you factor in all of those elements, and a 2023 Willis Towers Watson survey found that 67% of employees had never negotiated any element of their compensation beyond base salary. 67%. The average worker is leaving somewhere between $12,000 and $18,000 in annual total compensation, unclaimed not because the company wouldn't have moved, but simply because the employee never asked. When you're in a salary conversation, you're not negotiating a number. You're negotiating a package. And the package has a lot more surface area than most people realize. If the base won't move, ask about the bonus target. If the bonus won't move, ask about equity. If equity is off the table, ask about the remote policy, the review cycle timeline, the professional development allowance. There is almost always somewhere to create value beyond the base salary line. And most people never find it because they stopped looking when the base negotiation ended. Delaying the salary conversation is a strategy, not an evasion. I want to spend a moment on this because I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable deflecting the salary question, like it's somehow rude or suspicious. It isn't. It's strategically correct, and good employers know it. I want to make sure I fully understand the responsibilities and growth opportunity here. Before we discuss compensation, can we revisit this once we've both confirmed this is a strong mutual fit? Is a complete, professional, entirely reasonable response to a salary question asked too early in the process. You are not dodging, you are sequencing the conversation correctly. Carnegie Mellon negotiation research found that candidates who successfully delayed compensation discussions until after receiving verbal enthusiasm from the employer achieved final offers, averaging $11,400 higher than candidates who engaged in salary discussion during initial screening calls. The mechanics of this are simple. Enthusiasm creates leverage. The more invested the employer becomes in you specifically, the more they'll pay to secure you. A salary conversation in round one, before they've fallen in love with your candidacy, happens when your leverage is at its lowest. A salary conversation after they've told you they want you is when your leverage is at its highest. Delay deliberately. It costs you nothing and gains you everything. The stage of the process determines how you answer. Here's something subtle but important. The same response to the salary question lands completely differently depending on when in the process it's asked. What reads as appropriately cautious in round one reads as evasive in round three. What reads as confident specificity in the final round reads as premature in the first conversation. In early interviews, the question is a budget screen. The company is trying to eliminate people who are out of range before investing significant time in them. Your goal is to stay in the conversation without anchoring yourself. Reverse the question, ask for their range. Give a very wide range if pressed. Don't anchor. In mid-process conversations, the question is a serious interest gauge. They're asking because they're actually considering you and want to understand if the numbers can work. This is where your research-backed range belongs. Be specific, be confident, anchor it in data. At the offer stage, the question is a negotiation opening. Treat it as one. Ask for time to review the full package before responding. Never accept on the call. Always give yourself 24 to 48 hours. Context determines everything about how your answer lands. The candidate who delivers a perfectly calibrated answer for round three and round one sounds like they're rushing. The candidate who gives a round one answer in round three sounds like they're stalling. Read where you are in the process and respond accordingly. Never apologize for your number. Not once. This one is worth dwelling on because it's subtle and it's devastating. I've watched candidates make it all the way through a well-executed salary conversation and then sink it in the last moment with language like, I know this might be on the higher end, but, or I'm fairly flexible, I was just thinking maybe around, or I hope that doesn't seem unreasonable. Every one of those phrases is telling the employer, I don't fully believe I'm worth this. And a trained hiring manager will hear that signal and act on it immediately. Dr. Deepak Malhotra of Harvard Business School documented across thousands of salary negotiation case studies that apologetic framing reduced final offer values by an average of 9% compared to neutral or confident framing of the exact same number. Your tone is worth thousands of dollars. Literally. The content of what you say matters far less than the confidence with which you say it. State your range. Don't add qualifiers. Don't soften it. Don't invite them to push back by expressing preemptive flexibility. Say the number as though it is the natural, obvious, well-researched conclusion of the work you've done, because that's exactly what it is. Then stop talking. Silence after your number is where the money actually lives. This is probably the least used and most powerful technique in the entire salary conversation. And I say that as someone who watched it work from the employer's side of the table repeatedly. After you state your range, the instinct for almost every candidate is to keep talking, to justify the number, to add context, to preemptively manage the reaction they're anticipating. Don't state the range. Stop. Let the silence sit. Columbia University psychology research on negotiation silence found that 72% of hiring managers who were met with confident silence after a salary range either met the number or opened with a counteroffer above their original intention. Because silence communicates something very specific, that you are not desperate, that you are not anxious, and that you are not moving. A candidate who fills the post-number silence with nervous chatter is a candidate who can be waited out. A candidate who sits comfortably in the quiet has just communicated that the number was not an opening bid made in hope. It was a position stated in confidence. The first person to speak after a salary number is stated almost always makes a concession. Make sure that person is not you. A competing offer changes everything. I want to be straightforward about this one because it makes some people uncomfortable. If you have a competing offer, a real one, even from a less prestigious company, even for a role you're less excited about, it is the single most powerful tool you can bring into a salary conversation. JobVite's 2023 Recruiter Nation report found that candidates with a competing offer received final packages averaging 17% higher than candidates without one. You don't need to fabricate anything. You don't need to exaggerate. Even I'm currently in final stages with another organization and expect to have clarity on their offer by end of week is enough to change the dynamic completely. Because it introduces urgency, and urgency is the enemy of employer leverage. The cost of restarting a search from scratch after losing a preferred candidate averages $4,700 per hire, according to SHRM data. When a hiring manager knows that a real competing offer is on the table, they're not just thinking about your salary anymore. They're thinking about the full cost of losing you. If you don't have a competing offer, the best move is to create one. Running a parallel search isn't disloyal, it's smart. And having real alternatives in your back pocket transforms every salary conversation you have from a position of hope to a position of genuine options. The negotiation doesn't end when you accept, it ends when you leave. Here's the thing that almost nobody thinks about when they're focused on landing an offer. Every single raise you receive for the rest of your career at that company is calculated as a percentage of your starting salary. Every bonus target, every promotion bump, every year-end review conversation, they all orbit the number you negotiate on day one. A $5,000 difference at hire, which feels small in the moment, which feels like a reasonable compromise, to make the discomfort of negotiation and compounds into a $50,000 to $150,000 difference over a decade of 3 to 5% annual raises. And Linda Babcock's landmark research at Carnegie Mellon found that professionals who negotiated their starting salary earned an average of $1 million more over a 40-year career than those who accepted the first offer. $1 million. The difference between negotiating and not negotiating is not the number on this month's paycheck. It is the entire trajectory of your earning life. When you understand that, the question, what are your salary expectations, stops feeling like an awkward administrative formality and starts feeling like the most important question of the entire interview. Because it is. Let me bring this back to where we started, because I think it matters. The two candidates I described at the beginning of this video weren't different people. They weren't different levels of smart, or different levels of experienced, or different levels of worthy of the role. The only difference between them was that one of them understood what the question was actually asking, and one of them thought they were just filling in a form. The salary conversation is not a pleasantry. It's not a data collection exercise. It's a negotiation that begins the moment the question is asked, and it favors heavily, structurally, by design, the side that named a number first. The entire apparatus of hiring is built to get you to name that number before you have the context, the leverage, or the information to name it wisely. Now you know that. What I want you to walk away with isn't a script to recite, although having language prepared matters, and I've given you some. What I want you to walk away with is a different understanding of what's happening in that conversation. The company has a budget. They know it. You don't. Your job is to make them reveal it before you reveal anything. Research the market so your range is grounded in data, not guesswork. Never give a single number when a range will do. Never apologize for the range once you've given it. Let silence do the work you're tempted to undo with words. Consider the full package, not just the base. And understand that the number you walk away with today is not just this month's salary, it's the foundation that everything else gets built on for as long as you stay. This isn't about being aggressive or difficult or demanding. The best salary conversations I ever had from the employer side of the table were with candidates who were warm, professional, specific, and completely unmovable. They weren't adversarial. They were just grounded. They knew what they were worth. They'd done the work to verify it, and they communicated it with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to apologize for their own value. That's the energy. Not confrontation, not performance, just someone who understood the game well enough to play it honestly and came out exactly where they deserved to be. Go do your research. Know your number. Know your range. Know your walkaway. And the next time someone asks you what your salary expectations are, you'll know exactly what they're really asking and exactly what to say back.